Yeah, I have to note for the record that I am participating as a private citizen, independent scholar, what have you, not as a federal employee. And I also want to apologize for the fact that having been locked out of our office, this is going to be a bit of a hodgepodge of things based on what I happen to have at hand. But someday we'll all go back to work. Anyway, I want to talk about Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. I was not sure what we were going to call him, actually. I was been calling him Little Ricky, but I guess that's not appropriate. But so I'll stay with Rick. Frederick Law Olmsted Jr.'s association with the park system of Washington, I think, is analogous to his father's relationship with New York Central and Prospect Park, which I don't have to belabor to this audience. Not only did the young Olmsted play a prominent role in shaping the city's preeminent public spaces, but the experience fundamentally influenced his career and by extension the rise of city planning as a professional practice and social force. For over half a century, Olmsted lent his talents to the articulation and realization of an ambitious vision of the nation's capital, beginning with his participation in the 1901 Senate Park Commission and extending through his tenure with the National Commission of Fine Arts, the National Capital Park and Planning Commission, and a wide array of formal and informal consulting arrangements. This long-term relationship exerted profound influence not just on the development of the nation's capital, but on the evolution of American city planning and urban design. His Washington work played a vital role in extending the legacy of 19th-century park movement, which Tom has talked about, and expanding its scope to encompass an ever-broadening array of practical and social concerns. I think that in order to appreciate the scope and significance of his role in the development of Washington and the broader history of American city planning, we need to transcend traditional interpretations of the Senate Park Commission. The Commission's plan for Washington's monumental core have generated study after study, but the equally ambitious proposal for an elaborate system of parks and parkways stretching throughout the metropolitan region has not received commensurate attention. This omission is both surprising and unfortunate. According to the Senate Park Commission's plan, with its scheme for the monumental core, and then presenting this abbreviated construct as a microcosm of city beautiful civic improvement, has led to serious misunderstandings, both of the plan itself and of the history of American city planning. Not only did the Commission devote the greater part of its report, the Senate Park Commission report, to the articulation of a wide-ranging and diversified park system, but these proposals profoundly affected the development of 20th century Washington and continue to play a prominent role in shaping the city's image for residents and visitors alike. More inclusive reading of the Commission's report reveals the park system proposals were as significant as the more celebrated mall schemes and suggests that these humble recreational spaces, and not the grandiose but idiosyncratic monumental core, are linked the Senate Park Commission most firmly to the mainstream of American city planning. Now, a number of practical, biographical, and historical figures contribute to this outcome. The Commission's rendering of the monumental core are compelling works of art in their own right. Burnham's famous dictum about the efficacy of big plans was clearly reflected in these commanding visions. The dark, diminutive Parkway sections, in contrast, possessed little of the requisite magic to stir men's blood. Simple geography played an important role. The outlying parks and parkways were literally marginalized in the few images where they appeared, showing up as vague green spaces at the fringes of the boldly delineated monumental core. The same is true of the famous models, where the waterfront section of Rock Creek and Parkway is the only park element depicted. And this was followed in contemporary accounts and then for the first 20 years or so, and really throughout the course of American city planning history, this emphasis on the monumental core. This is the 1915 National Geographic issue on the national park, these images, where the public finally sees color versions. Now, biography exerted a powerful influence as well. Burnham and McKean were at the height of their careers. St. Gaudens may have been past his prime, but remained one of the most celebrated artists in America. Olmsted, by contrast, had just passed his 30th birthday. He was no longer the young college student who had helped his dad out on summer vacation on the world's Columbian Exposition, but that experience undoubtedly shaped his relationship with the Commission's senior members. And again, while he pointedly eschewed the junior, he was still the young Olmsted, often referred to as that, just beginning to work out of his father's shadow, who was always looking over his shoulder. Ironically, while he was overshadowed by the senior commissioners, Olmsted was the first engaged to undertake the project, Burnham's cooperation was then secured, and the others soon followed. The historiography of the commission played an important role. Charles Moore's role as coordinator and chronicler shaped our reading of the plan, as did the AIA's influence, which was intent on elevating the profession of architecture and considered the Beaux-Arts neoclassicism to be the most dignified form of architectural expression. The architectural community emphasized L'Enfant's vision and viewed it as a precursor and justification for its emphasis on the Baroque aggrandizement of public buildings and civic spaces. There's also the question of audience. The AIA and its ilk were addressing a national rather than a local audience, while the Washington Board of Trade and other local sources bent on improving the quality of life for everyday residents, emphasized the broader park system components. And on a related note, the monumental core emphasis was vital to the AIA's efforts to claim paternity for the plan. After the AIA initial proposal failed to attract sufficient support, the Board of Trade's influence was pivotal in securing the Commission's authorization, with the emphasis on public buildings diminished and the park system brought to the foreground. These were proposals that the Board of Trade had been pushing for 20 years. Since the AIA and its supporters played a dominant role in writing the history of the Commission, the emphasis on L'Enfant and the monumental core could reflect a desire, whether conscious or not, to minimize the Board of Trade's contributions while elevating the AIA's position. The rapid replacement of the Senate Park Commission's official title with Macmillan Commission followed the common practices of honoring political sponsors, but also deflected attention from the broader goals of the plan and its complex heritage. Emphasizing the monumental core also helped establish and maintain the conventional stereotype of the City Beautiful movement, for better and for worse. When the City Beautiful was in its heyday, emphasizing the monumental core and downplaying the park dimensions helped differentiate the movement from its predecessors and elevate the reputations of its practitioners. For critics who viewed the City Beautiful as an intellectually and artistically bankrupt folly that delayed the progress of modern architecture and scientific city planning, calling attention to the park system components complicated the characterization of the movement as an atavistic exercise. Yeah. Okay. Perpetrated by priggish aesthetes bent on imposing imperialistic order on unruly urbanites. The simplistic mall-centric interpretations of the plan also fit perfectly into the convenient narrative that began, this is what everybody uses in their courses, right? The convenient narrative that begins with the ephemeral vision of the 1893 World's Fair, reaches its apotheosis in the Senate Park Commission plan, and comes crashing to earth with Burnham's unrealized plans for Chicago and San Francisco. Though again, most City Beautiful plans emulated the plan's broader goals in calling for wide-ranging park systems and other practical improvements. In fact, the park dimensions of these plans were generally their most successful attributes, responding to the practical needs of local residents and remaining popular long after the Baroque excess of monumental civic centers appeared bannered and out of date. A final reason for downplaying the park dimensions was that they complicated efforts to present the Senate Park Commission's plan as a revolutionary document that sprang full form from the commissioners' collective brows and dramatically altered the landscape of American city planning. The monumental core proposals were striking, and the combination of comprehensive park system with World's Fair influenced architectonic excess was arguably a significant step forward, but the park and parkway dimensions were deeply rooted in local and national precedents. The Commission made no secret of the plan's affinity with mainstream traditions of American civic improvement, acknowledging the value of existing local studies, invoking examples from park developments throughout the country. The Boston park system in particular was hailed as an important predecessor, both as a source of design precedents and as a framework for the report's organization and underlying goals. Despite the later emphasis on the Chicago World's Fair, Boston's park system and the writings of landscape architect Charles Eliot had an equal or greater impact on the Park Commission and on the evolution of American city planning in general. In 1893, the same year as the celebrated Chicago Fair, Charles Eliot produced a report for the Boston Metropolitan Park Commission that fundamentally altered the practice and politics of American urban planning. By transcending municipal boundaries and considering the needs of an entire metropolitan region, and addressing a wide variety of scenic, recreational, and practical concerns in a detailed and methodical manner, Eliot's report pioneered an approach to comprehensive urban analysis that served as an explicit model for the Senate Park Commission. Olmsted and others repeatedly extolled the virtues of Eliot's approach in their writings and discussions, as the Commission's goals and methods were being refined. Significantly, the report employed numerous graphics from the Boston Park system, but none depicting Chicago's vaunted Exposition, something nobody seems to point out. On the left, you see the Senate Park Commission. On the right, you see the cheap government version, outlining the needs and comparisons of park systems. These are all illustrations from the Senate Park Commission report, using Boston as an example for some of the more mundane, practical, people-oriented improvements. Some of the other aspects that we never think of when we think of the plan and about the City Beautiful movement, admonitions to watch out for the dangers caused by private encroachments on viewsheds. Again, mundane concerns about what we now call wetlands, used to be called swamps, malarial swamps, and again on the left you see the Boston plan. On the right you see the Senate Park Commission plan. Again, using similar images with Henley. We're still waiting for the Anacostia to realize that goal. Boston seemed to have gotten it. And again, while the Senate Park Commission report was geographically limited, the Eliot's emphasis on the metropolitan region and preservation of more natural spaces was reflected a little bit in calls to preserve Great Falls and develop approaches in the Senate Park Commission plan. And the basic outlines of the plans is obviously a very strong resemblance. Now, much has been made about the young Olmsted's supposedly formative experience developing plans for the Chicago. Something's missing. Exposition. But in the actual discussions leading up to the Commission's formation, his inclusion was explicitly predicated on his familiarity with Boston's park system. That's what they brought him in for. Not only was the Olmsted name intimately associated with the city's park system, but Olmsted had succeeded Eliot as the Commission's landscape architect, and this was among his first, if not the first, of his many public appointments. Olmsted brought Eliot's ideas into the discussion, again, long before Burnham even appeared on the scene. He also brought with him the landscape architect's insistence that all plans to be developed from intensive first-time examination of the features of the site, which would be kept in mind while working out everything from broad planning conceptions to minute details, all of which were conceived as integral components of a unified whole. And again, while the monumental core was emphasized, Olmsted spent an enormous amount of time tramping around the city and its environs to ensure that the Commission's plans were rooted in detailed knowledge of existing condition. This painstaking process of laying out parks, playgrounds, and basic amenities may not elicit the same degree of excitement as the celebration of extravagant architectural statements, but by ushering 19th century park planning principles into the 20th century as the basis of increasingly comprehensive improvement programs, the park system proposals benefited the cities of Washington while setting stage for the development of modern urban planning. As Tom said, bringing that public landscape ideal into the 20th century. Over the course of Olmsted's career, one can see this pendulum swing from a more overtly aesthetic influence to a more utilitarian emphasis, both in his own work and in the profession as a whole, but the fundamental assertion was that both elements were essential and capable of being integrated into a harmonious whole. Articulating a grand vision for Washington was a monumental achievement. Implementing it was an even greater challenge. More than any member of the Commission, Olmsted was intimately involved in this effort. This was partly due to his relative youth. St. Gaudens died in 1907, McKim in 1908, and Burnham in 1912, but also due to inclination, both personal and professional. Not only had developed a strong affinity for Washington and its environs, but he was deeply committed to the concept of urban planning as an ongoing enterprise and one that depended on long-term commitment, collaboration, and constant recalibration, both to refine preliminary ideas and adapt to changing circumstances. He consulted informally, undertook many commissions, was a charter member of the Commission of Fine Arts, serving from 1910 to 1918, and an original member of the National Park and Planning Commission, serving from 26 to 32. He also arranged for longtime Olmsted firm employee James Langdon to get a job with the Office of Public Buildings and Grounds, both to keep abreast of developments and attempt to ensure his visions are being implemented. After 1912, his position as the sole surviving member of the Park Commission invested him with a unique authority, both in terms of articulating, or claiming to articulate, aspects of the Commission's thinking that didn't make it into the report, and to recommend alterations in response to changing circumstances and additional deliberations. As Arlene Levy has noted, this often caused considerable consternation for those who viewed the original document as an immutable authority. But again, Olmsted viewed planning as a verb and not a noun. Plan was a verb and not a noun, not something that was set in stone. And again, you see obviously conflicts between Olmsted, the landscape architect, and the architect members of the commission. Now, Arlene has talked, something happens when you get over that way, about his changes to some of the key spaces like the monumental, the base of the Washington Monument and Union Square. And I'm going to talk about a few things I know well, the Rock Creek Potomac Parkway especially. Rock Creek Potomac Parkway was a classic City Beautiful era improvement designed to provide an attractive link between the mall and Rock Creek Park while transforming a degraded stream valley into an attractive linear park. As with many City Beautiful plans, and again, Olmsted and the Commission was not ashamed to admit this, it was based on and related to a number of prior plans dating from the 1880s. The Washington Board of Trade had a scheme beginning in 1889. Samuel Parson was engaged in 1900 to come up with this rather grandiose plan, the two on the right, to acquire a huge tract of Georgetown and create a formal boulevard. And the Senate Park Commission plan talked at length about the desirability of the parkway. Despite the Commission's endorsement there were two basic, there was a big argument between whether to have the open valley plan, what we think of now as a traditional stream valley park, and a closed valley where you put the eyesore and public health menace in a conduit and built a nice formal boulevard. Things like people envisioned Boston's Commonwealth Avenue as a grand residential district. These debates went on really until 1908, and finally it was the district commissioners who ruled in favor of the open valley plan. This is when Olmsted brings Langdon down in 1915 to produce the plan on the bottom, which articulates the vision in great detail. But because of funding and other issues, the parkway does not get started for a long time, land and acquisition and funding. And the plan evolves through multiple stages through the 20s and is not actually completed until the 30s. Olmsted in 1924 is no longer on the Commission of Fine Arts, but Charles Moore invites him to review the 1924 plans. And Olmsted comes down, spends a considerable amount of time reviewing the situation, and issues a report that the Commission of Fine Arts is not really happy with. And here we see, as happens many times in Olmsted's career here, they pick and choose what they want to trade on his name, his prestige, and his advice, but they also eliminate certain suggestions that he makes. One suggestion that they did use, and I'm sorry that the National Archives was closed, so I couldn't see this, you probably can't see on the right, but Olmsted was greatly concerned with how you would deal with border roads to parkways. And so on the way back from his trip on the train, he scribbles, and these little notes are in National Archives, notes on border roads. He types up a manuscript for the Commission of Fine Arts, and then it's published later on the same year in Landscape Architecture. So a really clear-cut example of this affecting broader city planning. But as Olmsted reviews this plan, he has serious objections to certain sections, including a place where the district commissioners and the Commission of Fine Arts endorsed the idea of moving the road to the right side of the river, the east side of the river, which Olmsted said would destroy an attractive area of trees. He illuminates in very colorful language the undesirability of this, recommends routing the Parkway Drive out of the valley at this point, and the Commission of Fine Arts says to each other, you know, we can't have Olmsted going against us on this. They pocketed that suggestion and just quoted him liberally in their report on this component. And you see where the driveway did go through a nice strand of trees. He also complained, as he always frequently did, that the plan bared the hallmarks of being done without careful examination of the site. In another instance of the commission pocketing Olmsted's suggestions, on the final lower part of the plan here, the current landscape member, John Greenleaf, was against the district commissioner's plan to route traffic across the monumental Watergate steps that had been part of the McKim's, Mead and White's plan for the Arlington Memorial Bridge. And he tells Moore not to send this proposal to Olmsted, noting Olmsted's tendency to fix upon some point an elaborate out of due proportion due to utilitarian concerns, and the risk of having a prominent ex-member of the commission go against us and deciding this all-important matter on the basis of a relatively minor traffic situation. So Moore says, well, we'll eliminate this pesky plan, but it doesn't do any good. The Parkway was finally completed in 1936 and is a classic example of an early 20th century picturesque parkway. But at this time, it's already out of date. And this is where we see a pivotal moment in Olmsted's relationship with Washington. This part's going to be very brief, talking about George Washington Memorial Parkway, which had been part of the Senate Park Commission's vision of parks up and down along the river, and embraced by the National Capital Park and Planning Commission with Olmsted as a member. When it's actually passed, however, it's part of the bicentennial celebration of George Washington's birth. It's a big political extravaganza. And the Bureau of Public Roads is put in charge of it because they see it as an opportunity to demonstrate the application of parkway principles to modern motorway design. Now, in 1929, when the plans were called for, who do you call when you want a modern motor parkway? Do you call Olmsted, who's associated with the Muddy River and can't even get his own famous parkway built? No, there's a new gang in town, as Tom noted. The Westchester County Park Commission, and as Tom pointed, is now the state of the art in both parkway design and broader regional park planning. And this is interesting. VPR Chief John McDonald sends a telegram to Olmsted saying, would you like to direct the project? We got to get it done really quickly because of this bicentennial pressure. Olmsted immediately replies, telegrams back from Palos Verdes saying, I can't do it, I don't feel good, I'm really busy. He's got the State Park Commission plan for California on his plate. My firm associates are too busy, we can't do it. And he mentions suggesting some other people, but he doesn't say who they are. But we see, before McDonald even gets a formal letter of refusal, he's telegramming Clark and Downer and telling them to come down and design the parkway. And this now becomes like a second Senate Park Commission plan in its own realm. Plans for the parkway are shown in the Capitol, these grand models, just like the Senate Park Commission. They make movies to demonstrate it, the most contemporary way of promoting it. And when it's completed, it's a streamlined modern motorway combining picturesque aesthetics with a higher speed and traffic volumes. And like the Senate Park Commission plan, it becomes a model, a much talked about model, written about in popular and professional publications. And its landscape design things are very influential, including being copied literally translated by the Germans for use in the Reichsautobahn. Which leads, very quickly to the Autobahns and other developments in America, to the highway boom and the freeway boom and freeway protests. And now we circle back to Olmsted, or the Olmsted brothers at least. By 1950, his proposals for Washington are pretty well realized, and as well as the broader regional focus of expanding regional planning into a regional planning enterprise. There's another vision for the city that becomes dominant at this time that's not really an Olmstedian vision. Traffic planning. And here we see traffic studies of Washington, D.C. We see Rock Creek as the ideal place for an arterial radial highway because it's straight, it's where people want to go, and it's free, open, available space. And it will also connect to a circumferential beltway. This is fought throughout the late 40s and 50s by Sierra Club, Audubon, society, prominent senators, and other influential people who live around the park. And the eventual concession is that the radial link turning Rock Creek Park into a radial expressway won't happen, but a little bit of the park's extension in Maryland will be incorporated into the Beltway, you see on the bottom right. But they promised to do this really well. Who do they get to do it? The Olmsted brothers. 1954, the Olmsted brothers are hired to put window dressing on the Beltway Commission plan. That's a little unfair, although that's what critics called it. Olmsted himself is not at all pleased. He's 84 at this point. He's out in California. And he writes, I want to say that I'm strongly opposed to a freeway or general traffic route to Rock Creek Park, especially on or near Rock Creek. It would divert the park from recreational purposes to grossly conflicting uses. And again, you see the grand model. They made a 16-foot model. They displayed it. They tried to promote it. It's constructed actually as a 4-lane parkway-like amenity, and the engineers say, but we're going to grade it so we can put 6 lanes in if we need to sometime in the near future, in the distant future. The distant future is 1961, and they widen it. And if you've ever been stuck in traffic around Forest Glen, and you notice that the road is much more sinuous and also has more vertical curvature, that's a remnant of this era. And if you look at it in combination with what happened to the Theodore Roosevelt, the plans for the Theodore Roosevelt Island, which on the bottom you see kind of a more formal composition with a natural landscape outlined in the Senate Park Commission plans, follow up in the National Geographic. And Olmsted worked on various plans in the 30s, seeing the island as a natural refuge in the city, which again, at the same time, is trumped by highway planning needs with the lovely Theodore Roosevelt Bridge. So you could argue that between the utilitarian transportation plans and this period when planners kind of go out into space with these grand abstractions. This is the 1961 plan for Washington. Not exactly, based on intensive examination of the ground and developing accordingly. I think their bread got a little moldy. But the situation may not have been so dire. In the 1967 plan for Washington, Ian McHarg uses Washington as a laboratory to develop his design with nature, where you see a return, again, with a great big team and all sorts of layers. It's telling, the planning group gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But you see, an attempt to return to this more Olmstedian vision with ecology added in. And this actually makes it into the 1967, later 67 comprehensive plan for Washington. Whether anything happens is debatable, but even relatively recently you see echoes of the Macmillan Commission plan. So again, Washington provides a laboratory to view Olmsted's associated with Washington, shows you the evolution from bringing Eliot's ideas and even earlier Park Commission park plans and park system plans into the 20th century, combining this intensive examination of site with increasingly large groups of planners to present this vision. And I'm not going to go into this, but I think you can make an equally good argument as jumping ahead to the next one, that Olmsted Brothers' plan, 1917 plan for Rock Creek Park, does the same thing for National Park Service planning. It's essentially the first National Park Master Plan, which other people insist was developed by Thomas Vint and others in the late 1930s. But this plan developed by Olmsted Brothers in 1917, 1918, has all the components that would later become part of the Park Service Master Plan. Thank you.